To this day, I think
a good result, a sharp increase in our vote would be a good result for the Scottish National Party. But what Scotland needs is an SNP victory.
But I don't see this erosion of Labour support. It doesn't come to us on the doorsteps. And in spite of all the media effort to talk up an SNP bandwagon in this campaign, it isn't happening.
By-election, I can remember Winnie Ewing saying that a candle had been lit that would never go out. We've lit a bonfire tonight. What the people in Govan want me to tell them inside that building is that they are and malicious, wicked and evil.
The poll tax finished and by the time of a double by-election.
Hi there, Gil. How are you?
Very well, Iain.
It's good to see you. Good to see you. Are you enjoying your retirement?
Well, I'm not really retired, Iain. I'm still 10 to the dozen. You know, I've always been a 7-day-a-week man. So
I was going to say, why am I not surprised?
Yeah.
Anyway,
my theory is if I stop, I'll die. So
yeah, well, keep working. That's the answer. I'm delighted to have you as my guest on the Prism. This is the latest in a series of Pals broadcasts where I've been chatting with my former colleagues over the years and sometimes remembering the past, but also looking to the future. We always start the programme with me saying something nice about you, Gil Paterson. The first thing I would like to say is you've been my closest political ally in politics since I joined the SNP. That's a burden enough for anyone to carry, but we've worked very closely over the years, no more so than in the early days when the party, if you remember, was in pretty desperate straits. I mean, there was no money, and when I say no money, there was no money. And at the time I started the challenge of the 90s, but I barely got out of the National Executive because I determined everybody in the National Executive had to contribute before we went asking members to do the same. And the elections came about. I stood down as the vice convener for administration, and you took over and run expertly the challenge of the 90s, which nobody really gave you terribly much credit for. But in my view, that was the turning point for the SNP. Alex Salmond was a very lucky leader indeed to come to power as the challenge kicked in, and he became the first SNP leader who had some adequate funding for his plans, and it transformed the political fortunes of the SNP, so much so I think it directly resulted in the pressure that was brought to bear on the Labour Party and the whole Constitutional Convention, Scottish Parliament, came from those early days. Now, the other thing I wanted to tell people about before we go into chat is the other significant difference at that time was the party got its first ever fundraiser. And the party couldn't afford the fundraiser. So basically you and I pledged to cover the costs of that fundraiser if he did not bring in more than he cost. And of course, we had the right, because we were doing that, to choose who the fundraiser would be. And we made sure we get somebody good so we didn't have to lay out the money. And of course, the party's always had a fundraiser since that day. So these are two remarkably important contributions, Gil, that you made that transformed the politics. People think sometimes it's just the folk that make fiery speeches that change what happens. But in real politics, it's people behind the scenes doing the important things that can also have those changes. Can you remember those times, Gil?
yeah, I remember well. I remember the days when the whole press corps was one person, Chris McLean,
Yeah.
and the research was one person, another great character, Ian Moore. And of course, Alan McKinney was in charge. And he was really the organisation. That's how. That was the SNP. That was it. You know, mainly. So.
I think they've got 22 now. You know, at that time it was probably 3. And I mean, I always remember a lady called Irene, somebody who was remarkable as well. And then Trudy joined. I mean, I think at the height of the times when I was on it, the SAPs, I think we actually got to 5 or 6 staff eventually. And of course, there was always Angus McGilvery, covered in oil.
Of course, yeah, I forgot that.
From printing all the leaflets, because we couldn't afford printers.
He could work absolute magic. I forgot that Angus Nutt was remiss of me. He was a really key person in the campaign. But it was just sheer hard work, determination, and folk that totally committed. And there was no such things as a clock. It's great. You could work with no money.
Last
thing, the SNP, if you ever became elected to a position in the SNP and the NEC, it meant that you had to run it yourself, and I mean run it yourself.
Last week I told a story about a good friend of yours and mine, Willie Spears, and about him campaigning in Bridgeton during the days of rabid sectarianism. And the next thing I want to talk to you about involves Willie as well, because he was your loyal assistant and sound engineer when you developed the most successful political campaigning vehicle Scotland's ever seen, when you created the Snappy Bus for the Govan by-election. It was a November by-election, as I recall. And the brilliance of this vehicle was that it was an open-top vehicle, but it was safe to travel in, but it had floodlights that lit up, which meant that it was like an ice cream van, and you could be sitting at the top of a block of flats and look down, and you could see Jim Sillars in the back with these speakers, which to this day were the clearest and loudest speakers I've ever come across in my life. And folk in Moss Heights and Govan who were trying to take the high road or whatever didn't get the chance because they were listening to Jim Sillars on the back of his Snappy Bus. And it was very, very effective. So, I mean, how did that come about, the Snappy Bus? What was...
Well, it was, I don't want to take any credit, because Jim said he wanted something that he could use as a travelling platform, a public meeting in every street. And that was my brief. So, and I've really been blessed with people that were very good, inventive. Ian Moore being one, Chris McLean being the other, and the other folks that I mentioned. And Willie Spears was brilliant with again, he could put wires and not transistors, but valves and stuff together. And his ability, he was an electrician, but his knowledge on sound was fantastic. So Willie put this kit together, and what we did was, we converted the vehicle so that it had cover so that Jim wouldn't get wet. And you're missing yourself out, because Jim's right-hand man during the work in the Snappy Bus was Ian Lawson. The two of you worked in tandem, and I can still feel the hairs in the back of my neck now when you would ride up with a Snappy Bus, stop, and Willie and I surveyed the whole of the constituency, and we picked areas where we would cover the maximum amount of households with one stop, and we proceeded to take Jim right throughout the constituency, and we would stop and Jim would give a 3 or 4 minute speech. I could, by the end of a couple of days, I could do the speech myself.
That's good.
It was repetitive, but it was the most remarkable thing that the speech that Jim made, and it's never been tried or tested anywhere else. It's never happened until the Margomobile. Again, I built that one, So I got, they came to me, they asked me to do it. I did it, presented it to Jim, and it was actually, don't give me credit because the idea is not mine. I just made the vehicle.
You made it happen. You made it happen, Gil.
Well, I made it happen, but the idea and actually making it happen in the speeches were all you and Jim Sillars. And I think that was the thing. It was the snappy bus that brought a victory in Govan, because
no question.
You could literally see people stopping in their tracks. They couldn't help themselves because the clarity of the noise, that it wasn't a noise that Bill created. It was
a powerful message.
It was so pure and virgin, the sound, and it didn't annoy folk, and you could go right through walls with it, and they would come to their windows. And I remember a time the journalists came with us, and all these hardened journalists who had not a good word to say about the SNP, and particularly Jim Sillars, I caught them all clapping after Jim's speech down at in one of our journeys. Caught them all clapping, and they almost apologised for clapping. It was so good at doing that, and you weren't so bad yourself.
Well, I've got to say, Gil, you've been a bit modest though, because if the truth be told, Jim Sillars was a candidate in Govan because of one person, and a wee bit of background politics that very
I don't
few
think
people...
you should tell him this, but
well, I think it's a great story. I mean, very, very quickly, I'll outline what happened. When there's a by-election, at the time, it was Alison Hunter who was the organiser. She was sent along to find out from Govan constituency who they would like as their candidate. And the meeting took place, and there was two people mentioned. One was Jim Sillars, and the other person was me, which was crazy because I was the worst person you could come for a seat like Govan. But anyway, put that to one side. So anyway, I was sitting in my house about a week later, and my phone rang, and it was you on the phone, and you said, "Iain, you've got to put your name in for Govan." And I said, "Don't be stupid, Gil. I've just joined from the Conservative Party. I would be an absolute disaster." He says, "I'm not bothered. I'm not intending you to be the candidate. But if you put your name in, Jim Sillars will have to put his name in to be the candidate." Because seemingly you'd found out that Jim was showing a wee bit of reluctance to be the candidate. And the left in the party were trying to push someone else in instead of Jim. In the hope but they've been told that the other person probably wouldn't get it, that if they didn't get Jim, they would probably go for me. So for that reason, you convinced me I had to put my name in, because I agreed with you that I thought Jim Sillars was the only person that could possibly win Govan. So the night of the selection was hilarious, because there was a shortly at 3 Andrew Brophy, excellent candidate, Jim Sillars and myself, and we drew lots, and with my usual luck, I got the draw to go in last. So Andrew went in first, said his piece. Jim went in, said his piece. And I was to go in as the third person. And I wandered in. The first thing I said was, "I'm only here to tell you one thing." "What's that?" "You've got to pick the guy that was in here a minute ago." And I was sitting stunned going, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Well, the only reason I'm here is to tell you you've got to pick him." And even then, I mean, it just shows you how divided the SNP was at the time. I got a really, really stupid question from somebody saying, "Well, if we pick him, will your supporters in the party work for him?" I said, I'm here telling you to take him, and I'm telling you right now, if they won't work for him, they're no supporters of mine or friends of mine, because I'm going to stop work tomorrow morning if you pick Jim Sillars, and I'm going to be with Jim Sillars day in, day out, right up until the election count. And as you know, Gil, that's what happened. But very few people in the party know that it was you that came up with the plan to convince Jim to stand. And that, again, was a turning point politically for the SNP. You should have an agent, Gil, because if folk knew what you've done over the years, you'd be one of the most famous politicians in Scotland. But you do it behind the scenes, you do it quietly, you don't look for the praise, and that makes you a great guy, seriously great guy. And I'm very proud to be a friend. for that particular.
Flattery will get you everywhere, Iain.
Well, that's that. Well, I've only learned that. I mean, through my years calling everybody names, it's a bit late in the day, but I'm now moving to being quite nice to folk in the hope that it's more effective, you know. So anyway, we've got to talk some politics. That's enough reminiscing. Let's start with probably Section 30, the one that I've asked everybody about. I mean, I've got absolutely no faith that it's coming. I think we're, frankly, in a very bad place as long as we support the referendum. I'll come on to some of the reasons for that. But at this stage, what's your own view on the referendum? Do you see it happening anytime soon?
Well, I mean, I've got quite strong views. First of all, the timing of the referendum, Iain. I know that many people are very impatient. I understand the impatience because if you think about it, that our enemies or the enemies of independence are so divided at the present time. And I mean, you really couldn't make it up that the absolute cock-ups that they've made in so many ways, and taking people for granted, and the corruption in terms of giving all your pals contracts, you know, and you know, you get called out, nobody resigns, and nobody even puts their hand up, and the public are not blind to this, you know, and of course COVID comes along also, and then Brexit. All these things play on the public, and they play into the dedicated people. Just because somebody believes in independence and they don't believe in the same journey as me doesn't make them wrong, or they're not my enemy. Everybody's got a different view. Everybody owns this. I've always been a believer, and you'll know this yourself from experience, that when you joined, you know, anyone who changed their mind, having witnessed my dad changing his mind, which was a hard shift for him, then they've got to be given space and time and cuddled, if you like, and encouraged, you know, and not castigated. So with that part in mind, my experience, if you like, my constituency was divided in two. It's, you know, one part was Western Bartonshire, one part was Eastern Bartonshire. Western Bartonshire, that's Clydebank. We were on just a shade over under 54%. Great campaign there. Eastern Bartonshire, 39%, just under 39%. And you say, well, what's the difference? And the difference was that I chapped in both areas a substantial number of doors way before the referendum. And I found that fairly early on in the Eastern Bartonshire side, that although it was almost hostile towards independence in a way, there were so many of the people that I spoke to were like independence, that they were already convinced with the questions that were coming up from the No campaign, and they were persuaded by them. And so if we roll forward to now, that picture's somewhat changed. That people in Eastern Bartonshire, or some people, and a good number in Eastern Bartonshire, from my experience, are now on to soft yes. And they're on to soft yes on the things that I've been explaining, that first of all, the way that Scotland was treated through Brexit, the promises, the total disregard for any opinion in Scotland. And that doesn't matter if you're in favour of Brexit or for or against, because if you're Scottish and your voice is not considered unless it happens to chime with London or the Westminster, then you're disregarded. So tomorrow, you know, maybe their bad day if they believe in Brexit. So, you know, so that total disregard has switched some people to a different position. And of course, this continuing shambles that you see from Westminster, and they're not getting held to account. People can see that also. And then if you roll into that, COVID, my view is that if we went for a referendum now, or geared up and said we're going to have it in 3 or 4 months' time, 5 months' time, then the soft nose, I think we would lose them, or we're in danger. You can't prove anything about this, Iain, but I think we would be in danger. And I think since if we fail the next time, it's going to be 30 or 40 years. I'll be well dead by that time. So I'm being very selfish. I want to see it in my time. So, COVID's going to change. Now, that doesn't say, if anybody tells you we need to wait until COVID is gone, I don't see COVID going in any time soon.
You'll be dead before it.
Yeah, exactly. So COVID has got to be under control. If it's under control and you can manage it, that's the time when we go. And I think the people I'm talking about, and I'm hoping that these people have been tested in terms of their opinion, focus groups, etc. My focus groups, that's what I'm getting, my own personal focus groups, or individuals. And we time this right, and we've made a commitment, the party's made a commitment, the leaders made a commitment, the executive have made a commitment, the government's made a commitment, and that commitment is that when things are starting to come under control, then we go for it.
I'm sorry to put a wet blanket in that, Gil, but I mean, the government's made commitments already. I mean, we were told, for instance, we would not be dragged out of the EU against their wishes. Ian Blackford stood up repeatedly and made that clear, that the SNP just would not tolerate it. It's happened, we're out, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's been umpteen promises about a referendum long before COVID came on the scene, that it was going to be delivered. I remember writing an article at the start of 2019, pleading with people to have patience with Nicola. I was supporting her, saying give her a chance to keep her word. But I'm afraid after that day, it became absolutely clear she had no intention of keeping her word. And it all became excuses, Gil. I'm sorry, we're friends, but I'm going to tell you the truth as I see it.
I don't see it that way. I mean, I think we would be off our nut to even contemplate a referendum during COVID. I really do.
I'm not suggesting we have it here and now, Gil, but we should have had it long before COVID took over. I mean, I'm writing an article at the moment, and I'm just reliving what happened after 2014, how the membership of the SNP doubled, then trebled, then quadrupled, then continued increasing until it was over 120,000, how Nicola wandered in to the hydro, filled to capacity like a pop star, people all raring to go. How we moved into the 2015 election, we won 56 out of 59 seats. Quite, inconceivable. In the past, and in the party you and I were in the 80s, that would have been independence, because the party's policy at that point was a majority of MPs at Westminster from Scotland, and we went for independence. So I was expecting, and I think many people were expecting, when do these independence negotiations start? Then we get the start of what I would describe as the nonsense. Who described the Section 30 requirement as the gold standard? You would expect unionists to say that. That was our side that said that. That was a cross that was built by our side for us to carry. I can't see that any justification for that type of that was a delaying tactic. And then we got into the 11-point plan, and then we got rid of the pressure, because pressure was building in the party. The party members were demanding action. So what was the solution? Did they get action? Well, they got action, but not the action they were asking for. The action they got was the removal of National Council. The fiddling of the NEC.
There's a couple of things in there. First of all, again, back to the East and Western Bartonshire scenario that we're talking about. Again, if we had gone, in my view, if we had gone before Brexit had happened, the soft nose would have deserted us. I don't think there's any doubt about that. No doubt. There's not enough of us, or there wasn't enough of us to win the election. It's okay, folk all rallying to join the SNP, but these were all the yesers. No's didn't join us, Iain. Brexit. If you looked at all the polling on the outcome of Brexit was a game changer.
Yeah, it brought us to 58%.
Making commitments in a political sense that you're saying that we won't tolerate Brexit, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm afraid you need to tolerate it because we're not independent and we don't have the powers to resist it. There is nothing we can do.
And why are we not saying that? Why are we not saying that, Gil? That's the problem. Why can't we shut our borders because we're not independent? Why are we saying we can't shut the border? Why don't we tell people we can't shut them because we're not independent? Why can't we do this because we're not independent? We don't tell people. So how can you expect the people of Scotland to recognise the importance of being independent when the Party of Independence never tells them why it's important? And we need to spell that out day in, day out. Now, I want to move on to something that's been very topical this weekend.
Just a wee thing, Iain.
Right, okay.
So that folk understand Gil Paterson. There was a day when it wasn't their policy to have a referendum. And that day, unfortunately, I failed that day because it was a national council. That's where it was decided. And it just got through in a whisker. And when it comes to a referendum, the policy at that time was a majority of MPs.
Yep.
And that wasn't for a referendum, that was for independence.
Yep.
That was our policy. And Margaret Thatcher agreed with that.
Yep.
Bring me a majority of MPs and you can have your independence. Basically, that's what you said. My argument that I used, I'll never forget it, was that a referendum was a bit like actually facing someone with a gun, pointing right at your face. And I said, well, here we are. Somebody's pointing a gun at my face. And I pick up the courage to wrestle the gun off them, drag them to the floor, take the gun off them, and find out it's no loaded. And the referendums, I'll put the bullets back in and give the person it back. That's my definition of a that was my thinking then. That you can't wind the clock back. We've made a commitment that we would have we need to have a referendum anyway. You need to ask the people. You can't just have a majority of MPs and not have a majority of the people.
Yeah,
so,
I agree, Gil, but there's other forms of referendum.
When it comes to the gold standard, I do believe, and I don't know who coined the phrase. I think it might have been Alex Salmon. It might have been. I'm not sure. I think as when you're in a grown-up situation, it's a bit like Europe, and I'm saying England leaving Europe because we didn't. They did. Okay, they left. The gold standard was the arrangements that were made. They didn't interfere in the election. They stood back. They said, right, on you go. When it came to the Brexit referendum, that's a gold standard for me. And the Section 30 gives you that guarantee. Whatever outcome, that's it done. But that doesn't mean to say that Gil Paterson, I think it is the gold standard, that someone in London or anywhere else can say to me or my people that they have any control over us in that regard. If they don't come to the agreement, and it's not a gift that we're looking for, it's not their approval, it's not being allowed. It's about saying we're grown up people. We've been in this United Kingdom for 300 years. This is what we want. And if our people decide you're going to support us on it, aren't you? And we're going to do everything we can between your country and my country, new country, to make it work for both of us. That's what Section 30 gives you.
Well, I think that's a very rose-coloured view.
If they decline it, if that's declined, all bets are off in my book.
Well, I mean,
I
I
am
think,
not. I'm not a prisoner to anyone. I'm a free Scot, and my people are free. And if my people decide, not if Gil Paterson decides, if a majority decide, then they're entitled to it, and
yeah,
they
and
will get it, as far as I'm concerned.
well, let's move it on. Let's determine who's deciding. Because I don't know if you read in my blog at the weekend, I had a piece by Professor Alf Baird raising the spectre of what the electorate, what the franchise is allowing in Scotland, and facing the reality that in a country with perhaps an electorate of 4 million, as many as 1 million of these people are not Indigenous Scots. They're incomers from either Europe or from the rest of the UK. And I've read people, in fact, I got a couple of letters from people saying, but don't worry, Iain, it'll be fine, because these 300,000 EU citizens that were here in 2014 who voted by about 57% against independence, they'll be in favour of independence this time because they were lied to over Europe. I'm sure that's true, but there's a yawning problem with that. And the yawning problem is a great many of those 300,000 are no longer here because of Brexit. They've went home. They're not here. They're not going to have a vote, even if they were allowed one. They won't have a vote next time. But what we have an awful lot more of now is people from the rest of the UK, largely England, who voted over 72% the last time they voted no. These are not soft no's, these are hard no's. These are people who consider themselves British, not Scottish, who regard Scotland as part of Britain, not Scotland. And we're not going to be able to convince them with any sweet words or whatever. And what we need is a fair franchise. Now, the route to that's a question mark. But the route I think is possible, looking at what's happened in other countries around the world, is if our MPs and MSPs came together and voted for independence, I think what would happen is Westminster would ignore that. And the minute they ignored that, that would open up the avenue of going down the United Nations route and appealing to the United Nations under their rules of self-determination of peoples. Because Scotland would be at that stage officially, whether they liked it or not, a colony. You can't be in a treaty where one part of that treaty has the right to overrule the sovereign other partner. That's not a treaty, that's prison. And that's what Scotland's facing at the present time. Do you agree?
Yes, no, Iain, because I'm not enamoured at all in what happened the last time round, 2014, that the franchise, there was no franchise in a way, because if you think...
It was a universal franchise.
If you contrast the difference between how the Brexit referendum was handled, there was no tolerance towards what European view was, no tolerance whatever.
They were denied
and no money flooding into England, if you like, or Scotland or the United Kingdom from out with. There was some black money managed to get in. That's difficult for any country to control, I give you that. But when it came to the Scottish 2014 referendum, there was so-called legitimate money flooded in, absolutely flooded in from everywhere, particularly from down south, from London, piled in.
And via Northern Ireland.
And black money coming from Northern Ireland. And, when it comes to whatever the franchise is, I would sum up this way. Whatever the franchise is, that franchise has got to be manufactured in Scotland. I don't care who is the overseer once the decision has been made. So the Electoral Commission, who I think are powder puff, I think the instances that I'm talking about, they had no rules to stop money flooding into Scotland, and nor did they voice their opinion about it, and they still haven't voiced their opinion about it. But this is our country, not someone else's. It's for us to decide. So I'll be happy if the rules that we decide to have are made in Scotland for Scotland, and I'll abide by that. And the other thing I would say to you that I can talk about my brother, right? My brother, no, I won't. I'll talk about my cousin, right? Duncan Martin, who him and his wife Margaret took off for Canada just after they left university, and made their life in Canada. And to this day, or the last time I spoke to Duncan, he was still a Scottish citizen. And Duncan's never coming back. And all his children he's one of the best Canadians you'll ever meet, professor. And the contribution he's made to Canada is just terrific. I wouldn't give him a vote, even if I thought he was going to vote yes. So, and my brother, he left. He fell in love, and while we were on holiday, and went to Manchester with his then girlfriend, and never came back. He only comes to the funerals and the weddings. I wouldn't give him my brother a vote, no matter how he votes. And so, therefore, if someone has decided that I think you've got there's one bit that you did speak about there. Franchise is for those who have decided to make their home here in Scotland and make a commitment to Scotland. They put up with what we put up with. They benefit from what we have. They enjoy our scenery or their scenery. This is their place now, as far as I'm concerned.
As long as there's a reasonable residency period beforehand, arriving 5 minutes before the referendum, no vote. But if you've been here 5 years, maybe 7 years, then that's a commitment to Scotland. I have no problem with voting that.
I think I can agree with you, and I do want new people to come. I don't care where they come from. They can all come from England. They can all come from wherever.
I mean, Gil, I think people don't understand this. What we're talking about here is who should have a say in the future constitution of Scotland. We're not talking about who are welcome, who are our friends, who are our work colleagues. These people are all welcome, no matter where they came from. That's not the debate. That's not the debate. The debate is who decides on Scotland's constitutional fortune should be the Scots, the indigenous people, and those who have lived a reasonable period of time in Scotland. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. That's exactly what the situation is in virtually every other European country. And there's no reason why we should be any different here. Particularly when we know it was pockled with second home franchises, all the rest of it the last time round.
Well, and this notion that you can have two votes and it depends where you are at a particular time when you can use it. I mean, it's not acceptable. This has got to be like iron brew. It's got to be made in Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no question about that, Iain. And I don't have in my mind. It's just who Gil Paterson. It's just who I am. I don't see anyone, no matter what the colour. I don't see a black person. I just see a person.
Absolutely.
I don't hear an English voice. English accent. I just hear a person, and if even if someone who is, well, I've got a saying, to be quite honest, and I do believe it, and this is what it is, just like my brother and just like my Canadian cousin, somebody comes here, and in their heart they might be Irish, in their heart they can keep that. They're welcome to their heart, and they can always have their heart as Irish. See, all the rest of it, it's mine. The rest is mine. I consider the rest of it as Scottish. So, but not coming up for a couple of months or a year to go or to contract and go back down or go somewhere else. Contractors, people, the indigenous population, plus people who have decided to make Scotland their home, even if they don't believe in independence, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree. If they're going to make Scotland their home and they've been here a reasonable period, irrespective of how they vote, they're entitled to a vote. We're not trying to cherry pick the electorate. All we're asking for is a bit of fairness. Right, on that basis, Gil, I'm going to thank you very much for your contribution. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. It's great that we've now gone to the end of the programme. We're still friends. There you go. It just shows you can have a wee argument somewhere along the line and still have a good chat and remain pally with your pal at the end of the broadcast. So thanks very much for taking part, Gil. You were
just let me remind you of something. Many years did you and I sit in the executive together?
Oh, I don't know, an awful lot of years. An awful lot of
years.
It seemed like it.
Probably about 40% of that time, I never voted with you.
So I always knew you were unreliable. I mean, you're a pal.
I'll tell you this, and I'll make this public. There's two people, if I was in trouble, one from the left and one from the right. And if my back was against the wall and I was in trouble, and that would be you and Alec Neil, I would have them side by side, one very left and one somewhat right. And I'm kind of in the middle. And so we'll always be friends.
I'm way to the left of you, Gil. I'm sorry. I'm way to the left. I've got pals like Alec Neil and Jim Sillars. I've got credibility. Kerry McCaskill. I've got credibility there. I mean, you, me a bit more shaky. But anyway, it was good talking to you. I hope you enjoyed taking part. I hope the viewers enjoyed that. I certainly did. I look forward to these Wednesday's pals chats. The problem I'm getting now is I'm running out of pals. So I've got to start thinking now about who I'm going to have on. But that was great, Gil. I really enjoyed that.
I hope it was all right because, something I forgot what this was broadcast. I hope I didn't swear.
Well, you don't swear very often, so your chances are pretty good, you never. So thanks once again, Gil, for taking part.
Pleasure, Ian.
I hope you all enjoyed that, viewers. Another excellent broadcast. All the best.
Good night, Ian. Thanks a lot.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.